The night my sister died, the palace bells never stopped ringing. They said she was poisoned while giving birth to the heir, and before she drew her last breath, she whispered a single word to me. Months later, her husband, the newly crowned emperor, summoned me to the palace. For the child's sake, he said, you will take her place. I was only 14. In the Qiao family, my sister was Amelia. I was Claire. They said 6 parts of her beauty lived in me, and all of her fate. From that day on, everyone in the empire called me what I truly was, the dead empress's shadow. Chapter 1. Run. Another nightmare. I woke again to that same echo. Half a year had passed since my sister's death, yet that final moment still haunted my dreams. Her face was pale as snow, eyes filled with bottomless fear. She hadn't even looked at her newborn son. With the last of her strength, she clutched my fingers, as if she wanted to tell me something, but no sound came. At last, her lips formed that single word. Run. Run from what? And where could I go? Amelia had raised me since childhood. I followed wherever she led, ate what she ate, slept where she slept. We were more than sisters. We were each other's shadow. Even my stepmother used to smile and say, you two really are true sisters, so alike in both face and heart. My birth mother, a maid from my stepmother's dowry, died soon after I was born. My stepmother treated me with affection so deep that I never felt motherless. After my sister passed away, I fell ill for months. Everyone in the Prime Minister's residence urged me to let go, but I couldn't. It felt as if a fog had settled before my eyes, a fog that hid something I needed to see. Then one day, my stepmother came to visit. Her eyes were red, her face pale. After a long silence, she finally said, the emperor has only just taken the throne. He's burdened with court affairs and has no time to look after the young prince. He and your father have discussed it. He wishes you to enter the palace and care for the child. Do you agree? She asked gently, but I knew. It wasn't truly a question. When the emperor commands, no one refuses. The little prince carried my sister's blood. If the palace devoured lives, then I would enter it myself, to protect him. I nodded. My stepmother didn't smile. Her voice trembled. The palace gates are deep as the sea. Promise me, Claire, don't end up like your sister. You're only 15. I held her tightly, burying my face against her shoulder. She had grown thinner, her warmth faint. Don't worry, mother, I whispered. You won't lose another daughter. Too many riddles surrounded my sister's death. If I didn't uncover the truth, I would never know peace. A few days later, the preparations were complete. As I stepped into the red bridal sedan chair bound for the palace, I slipped my sister's jade pendant into my sleeve. Sister, forgive me. This time I will defy your last wish. I won't run. I will walk straight into the trap. Although I was the emperor's first official empress, my late sister had already been posthumously honored as Empress Grace. That made me her successor, the second empress. Most women would die for such a title. But I felt no joy. I would rather my sister still lived, even if I married a common man and lived quietly forever. Inside Weiyang Palace, the phoenix candles burned bright. This place should have belonged to Amelia. When the emperor came in, he smelled faintly of wine, his gaze sharp but familiar. He lifted my red veil, and I smiled faintly. Brother-in-law. That was what I had always called him. His face stiffened. He once promised to find me a worthy husband, saying he'd treat me like the sister he never had. Yet now he had taken me as his wife. In my heart, he would always be my sister's husband. Amelia had loved him deeply, of that I was certain. I could never steal the man she had loved. My marriage was a matter of duty, not desire. He looked uneasy. Since my sister's death, he had grown thinner, his features sharper, the cold majesty of an emperor settling over his face. Brother-in-law, I said softly. It's been half a year. You've lost weight. Father said it was you who wanted me to enter the palace to look after the little prince. So, may I still call you brother-in-law in private? His eyes darkened. Then he took my shoulder gently. Claire, you must not call me that anymore, and before me you mustn't speak as if you're still a child. You are my empress now. So that was that. He once told me his wife's sister was his sister too. Now those words were gone. I smiled, obedient. Yes, your majesty, I understand. He handed me the ceremonial wine. I drank it all. The bitterness stung my throat and eyes. He seemed pleased. I tugged at his sleeve. Your majesty, may I see the young prince? Is he well behaved? Does he look more like my sister or you? He once said that if it were a girl, she'd take after my sister, but if a boy, it should resemble you." The warmth in his eyes dimmed again. I pressed on softly. "To see the prince is like seeing my sister again. I'll care for him well, and never let either of you down." At last, his expression softened. He removed my heavy phoenix crown himself. "Very well. I'll have the child brought here. You still haven't grown up, little one." I blinked up at him innocently. When the nurse brought the baby, I held him carefully. He slept soundly, his tiny features delicate, so like my sister's, and nothing like the Emperor's. My eyes burned. "Your Majesty," I whispered, "may he stay with me tonight?" It was already late. The Emperor's eyes carried a trace of weariness, yet he didn't object. "Very well," he said softly. That night he left Weiyang Palace and did not visit any of the other concubines. Instead, he returned to his own chamber. I sat there holding the sleeping prince, lost in thought. Before the child was born, my sister adored him even before she met him. She sewed tiger-head shoes, little caps, embroidered belly bands, all with her own hands. She had longed for his birth. Yet on the day he arrived, she refused to even glance at him. Even in her final breath, her gaze never once touched her son. My sister had always been proud, a brilliant, educated lady from the Prime Minister's estate. She was admired across the capital. For her to reject her own child so coldly, there could be only one reason. That child was her shame. But why? A chill ran through me. Something didn't fit. I had always been unusually sensitive, able to feel the emotions of those around me. It was a gift, or a curse. It was how I knew my stepmother's kindness was real. Whenever she came near, I could feel her love and worry. The same was true with my sister. But whenever I was close to the Emperor, I always felt uneasy, my heart heavy, my body tense. Even tonight, when we drank the nuptial wine, I had sensed his desire. If he truly loved my sister as deeply as he claimed, how could he look at me, her sister, with lust? My sister had only been gone half a year. The thought made me sick. Pieces of truth began to glimmer beneath the fog. The next morning, I went to greet the Empress Dowager. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes holding something unreadable. After a few polite words and a few jade trinkets as reward, she said quietly, "The new Empress resembles her late sister very much." At those words, the three other concubines in the hall looked at me, each with her own expression, jealousy, disdain, or pity. I bowed and replied, "Your Majesty, I am the young prince's aunt. It is only right that I should care for him. In both appearance and temperament, I am most like my sister." The Empress Dowager took a slow sip of tea, her voice mild. "If the Emperor wishes it, I will not object, but the harem feels too empty now. It may be time to add some new faces." I smiled. "You are right, Your Majesty. The Emperor is young and strong, and there is but one heir. It would be wise to let the royal bloodline flourish." As I walked back to Weiyang Palace, the three concubines followed me through gardens bursting with blossoms. Half a year had passed since my sister's death, yet her husband was already seeking new women to fill the palace. Would Amelia, if given another chance, still have devoted herself to such a man? Perhaps not. It wasn't her fault for loving him too much. The Emperor had once been tender, devoted. He had even drawn her eyebrows himself, ridden through storms just to deliver her a birthday gift. Back then, his gaze had held only her. Who could resist a love like that? When I returned to Weiyang Palace, my maid Green Pearl was furious. "Your Majesty, did you hear what they said? Lady Wang and Lady Lu were whispering that you're nothing but the late Empress's stand-in." I faced the mirror. Indeed, my reflection looked more and more like Amelia's. No wonder they said it. But this was no simple matter of resemblance. "Don't be startled," I told her quietly. "This is the palace, not the Prime Minister's estate. Have you done what I asked?" She nodded quickly, glancing around before whispering, "Everything is ready. Our people are in position." I smiled faintly. Sometimes silence was the most powerful move. For the next 2 weeks, I tended to the prince myself. The Emperor came often, sometimes to visit the child, sometimes to deliver gifts. To the outside world, he was the picture of devotion, the grieving widower who still cherished his late Empress's sister and their orphaned child. The court praised him as a man of eternal love. And me, the substitute Empress. Among the harem, the three other women seethed with envy. One morning after greeting the dowager, we walked through the imperial garden together. Lady Zhou, daughter of a general, looked at a patch of blooming peonies and said with a faint sneer, "Peonies are beautiful, but they're not the same as peonies from the root. No matter how similar, they're not the same flower." Her tone dripped with poison. Lady Zhou was bold, spoiled by her father's military power. She had long admired the emperor and saw me as her rival. I could feel her contempt, though it wasn't deep. The ones who truly hated me were the silent ones, Lady Wang and Lady Lu. At 15, a concubine's daughter, I had become empress only because of this face. But I would turn that face into a weapon. I plucked the brightest peony and tucked it into Lady Zhou's hair. "I once saw you ride and shoot with such elegance," I said with a smile. "A woman as skilled as you deserves a flower this proud." She blinked, startled. My kindness disarmed her. Her cheeks flushed. "Your Majesty, you flatter me." Her hostility faded. As I thought, she was one who could be won over. In the palace, survival depended on alliances. Over the following days, I sent her dishes from the royal kitchen, delicacies she couldn't resist. By the end of the month, she had grown plumper and far more talkative. She even began to defend me in casual conversations. "The Empress isn't like they say," she told others. "She's gentle. She even worries for the rest of us." Perfect. The strongest bonds in the harem were not born of love, but of appetite. The day of the imperial selection soon arrived. As Empress, I was required to attend. The emperor appeared uninterested, barely glancing at the rows of noble girls lined up before him. He waved a hand lazily, choosing a few by their family rank and leaving the rest for his ministers to recommend. Then, halfway through, he paused, his gaze fixed on a young woman in a pale pink gown. He pointed casually. "Add her to the list. Empress, do you have any better suggestions? I'll defer to you." He lowered his eyes again, pretending boredom. But I felt it, his sudden surge of excitement, his hidden joy. I turned to look at the woman he had chosen, and the world seemed to tilt. Her name was Chun Wen, but I knew her real name was Catherine Chu. My sister's killer. Months ago, evidence had pointed to the second prince for Amelia's death. He had been convicted of poisoning her and exiled thousands of miles away. But I had once overheard the second prince screaming at his wife, "You wretched woman! You and the crown prince destroyed me." And she, the same woman standing before me now, had laughed coldly and replied, "The crown prince and I were simply better players. You lost." Now she stood in front of me, reborn with a new name, entering the palace under false identity, protected, chosen. So this was the emperor's secret joy. He had loved her all along. He and my sister's murderer had conspired together. My nails dug into my palm until I drew blood. I forced a smile, saying nothing. When the selection ended, the emperor leaned toward me and whispered, "I'll leave the harem affairs to you. I'm tired." He left the hall, face calm as ever. But I had already felt the truth burning beneath his mask. My sister had not been his beloved white moonlight. She had been a pawn. And the word she mouthed before dying, "Run," was not just a warning. It was a plea. For 3 nights in a row, the emperor stayed in Weiyang Palace. Yet I could sense no joy from him, only restraint. He was avoiding Catherine Chu, the woman he had secretly brought back into the palace, now disguised as Lady Wen. His absence from her chambers was not rejection, it was protection. He didn't want her to become the target of the harem's jealousy. When a man truly loves a woman, he can play the hero she always imagined. And Ethan Zhao was indeed Catherine's hero. But what, then, was my sister to him? At dawn, I dressed him for court, standing quietly before him. I spoke in a small, docile voice. "Your Majesty, I'm still only 15. I fear I cannot yet serve you properly. Fortunately, you now have many sisters in the palace to attend to you. That eases my heart." He took my hand, stroking it gently, eyes deep and searching. "Empress, do you think me cruel? Believe me, I will never forget your sister. She was my truest love. But as emperor, I am bound by duty. The 3 palaces and 6 courts are beyond my will." I smiled, obedient on the surface, scornful inside. Bound by duty? As if anyone forced him to bed half the palace. He always saw me as harmless, a soft, naive girl. Let him. The best hunters wear the skin of prey. "Of course, Your Majesty," I said sweetly. "My sister was your life's great love. I live only to honor her memory." He smiled, pleased, and patted my head. "Good girl, I'll see you safe for the rest of your days." The moment he left, I exhaled and wiped my hand clean of his touch. Soon after, the concubines arrived to pay their respects. 6 of them now. Among them were 3 I had handpicked: Lady Wei, Lady Yao, and Lady Sima. Wei had once been betrothed to the second prince. She knew the truth behind Catherine's identity and could be useful. Yao was breathtakingly beautiful, her waist slender as silk. Rumor said her birth mother ran a brothel, though she herself had been adopted into a noble house. Sima was the granddaughter of a powerful minister, bold and reckless, a force of chaos I could unleash when needed. I welcomed them all kindly. We are all His Majesty's women. Let us serve him well and bring prosperity to the royal house. My voice trembled just enough to sound weak. The weaker I appeared, the bolder my enemies would grow, and the easier to destroy. Lady Sima smirked and said nothing. Catherine Chu, now Lady Wen, looked at me with hidden hatred. I tilted my head and smiled at her. They say Lady Wen is 17? You look closer to 19. Her face froze. She was in fact several years older, old enough to have been the Emperor's sister-in-law. Wei's lips curved into a knowing smile. Catherine clenched her embroidered handkerchief but said softly, Your Majesty jests. I came of age only last year. Chapter 2. Wei noble lady gave a light laugh. She knew the truth but dared not speak it aloud. I went on, my tone playful. Did you know? My sister once told me that His Majesty loved gardenias. She filled her rooms with them. Perhaps that's why I've always liked their scent. Lady Wen's face paled. Of course, she remembered. That same perfume had once marked their secret trysts. The other women looked away, uncomfortable. Later that evening there came to Weiyang Palace bearing a box of pastries from the city. I remember you loved these when you were a child, he said. Try them. I tore off a piece and ate with both hands, licking the crumbs like a spoiled girl. He laughed. You're still such a child. I mentioned Yao Beauty. She's charming, isn't she? Her waist could fit in one of my bracelets. I think you'd like her. He chuckled. You always say the strangest things. That night, for the first time in weeks, he chose another woman, Yao. Before he left, I gave a meaningful glance to my attendant, little Lindsay, one of my father's spies in the palace. He understood. A faint trace of Western incense was added to the Emperor's chamber, a special blend known to heighten passion. By dawn, word spread that the Emperor and Yao Beauty had shared an intense night, one that left even the servants blushing. I cradled the prince, smiling faintly. Amelia, I whispered to my sister in heaven, your son will not live in the shadow of monsters, I promise you. By morning, the entire palace buzzed with gossip. The Emperor had called for water 5 times during the night. When the concubines came to greet me, Yao's cheeks still glowed pink. You must be exhausted, I said kindly. You have pleased His Majesty. May you soon carry a prince. She blushed deeper, bowing low. The others seethed in silence. Lady Sima, the soldier's daughter, merely sipped her tea and teased the baby. But Catherine Chu sat there in pure white robes, mourning robes, really. Lady Wen, I said sweetly, in that white gown, one might think you're still mourning someone. Wei joined in smoothly. I heard the exiled second prince fell ill on the road and died. Tragic, isn't it? Catherine stiffened, her knuckles white. Of course the second prince was dead. Ethan Zhao had made sure of it. Sima's blunt voice cut in. You seem to know him well, Lady Wen. Why dress so somber unless it's grief? At that moment the herald cried, His Majesty approaches. I hid a smile. The Emperor's aura entered the room before he did, sharp and stormy. He had heard every word. The Emperor's face was calm, but I could feel the fury radiating from him. He glanced at Catherine only briefly before turning to Yao, pretending amusement. We exchanged polite greetings and he soon departed. But I saw it, the way his sleeve brushed Catherine's hand as he passed. So discreet, so obvious. When night fell, my spies returned with whispers. The Emperor and Catherine had met secretly in a side hall. When I read their words, rage burned so hot it made my hands tremble. So it's true, I hissed. It was all his doing, from the beginning. Green Pearl, startled, knelt beside me. Your Majesty? I closed my eyes. The truth fit together at last. Amelia, my father, even me. We were all pawns on the Emperor's board. He had never loved my sister. His heart had always belonged to Catherine Chu. And together, they had conspired to kill Amelia. Back then, Catherine had hidden poison in the second prince's manor, while the crown prince, Ethan Zhao, had slipped the same poison into Amelia's medicinal tonic during childbirth. The evidence found later had pointed neatly to the second prince's household. The perfect crime. Amelia, daughter of the prime minister, beloved of the nation, was sacrificed to crown him emperor. The realization left me hollow. I now understood my sister's final word. She had wanted me to flee, to survive, because she knew that I, her mirror image, would be used next. Used to keep the illusion of a devoted husband alive. Used to keep my father loyal to the throne. But what happens once an emperor no longer needs his pawns? He sweeps the board clean. I wrote a coded message and sent it to my father, summoning him to the palace under the pretense of visiting the young prince. When he arrived, I handed him the note I'd written in invisible ink, then burned it before his eyes. His face darkened as he read. "Claire," he said after a long silence, "what do you plan to do?" I looked down at the child in my arms, Amelia's son. My voice was calm as still water. "The emperor delays naming an heir. He must have other plans, but if he can discard my sister and our family after using us, why can't we do the same? If he can keep the child and kill the mother, then we can keep the child and kill the father." My father stared, stunned. "You mean?" "I mean," I said quietly, "that this boy will inherit the throne, and when he does, the Qiao family will rule beside him. The emperor took everything from us, we'll take it back." He was silent for a long time, then nodded once. "Very well." From that moment, the game truly began. After father left, Green Pearl brought in several of my most trusted servants. The moment I learned the emperor and Catherine still met in secret, I set my next plan in motion. "Lure Seema into their path," I ordered. "She must see them together." Catherine, still wearing white in mourning for the second prince, would surely stir the emperor's jealousy. And he, who had just spent several passionate nights with Qiao, would in turn ignite hers. They would burn each other. Seema would be the spark. She was a warlord's granddaughter, headstrong, fearless, and armed with a family name that frightened even the throne. If she saw the emperor with another woman, she would not keep silent. Green Pearl returned hours later, breathless. "Your Majesty, it worked." Seema noble lady caught them embracing in the corridor. The emperor pushed Lady Wen away at once, and announced he would spend the night in Seema's chambers. I smiled, slow and sharp. Catherine must be livid. That night, while the emperor slept in Seema's arms, I arranged another scene. A dancer outside his chambers, dressed in flowing white silk, exactly like Catherine. When he heard the faint music, he rose and searched the courtyard, but by the time he stepped outside, the dancer had vanished. He stood in the cold wind, lost and haunted. Inside, Seema waited alone, humiliated. By morning, she was in tears, cursing Catherine's name. At breakfast the next day, she faced Catherine in front of all the concubines, her voice sharp as steel. "Some women think themselves clever, bewitching His Majesty night and day. You've turned him against the rest of us." Catherine blinked, feigning innocence. "Seema noble lady must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Seema snarled. "I saw you with my own eyes." I sipped my tea, pretending not to hear. "Perfect. Let the tigers tear each other apart." Lady Wei, ever perceptive, gave a low laugh. "I've been reading a scandalous story," she said lightly. "It's about a woman who seduced her husband's younger brother. How disgraceful. Imagine such a thing happening in real life." The hall went silent. Everyone understood. Catherine's face turned white. Seema slammed her cup down. If such a woman existed, she'd deserve the water prison, or worse. I set my cup down gently. A pity, isn't it? Let's hope no such creature lives among us. The room filled with forced laughter. Catherine's handkerchief trembled in her grip. She would surely run to the emperor that night, crying, pleading. And he, ever the savior, would go to comfort her. He did. But Seema, furious, sent word that her chest ached with pain and demanded His Majesty's presence. Torn between them, Ethan Zhao went first to Seema's palace. By the time he returned, Catherine was waiting alone in tears. The trap was perfect. The next morning, the imperial physician brought astonishing news. "Seema noble lady is with child." I smiled, so my secret fertility draught had worked. If she bore the emperor's first son, her position would rise, and Catherine's would fall. "Excellent," I said calmly. "Ensure she receives the best care. Send double rations from the kitchens." Inwardly I thought, let her be proud. The higher she climbs, the harder the fall. For the next week, the emperor was radiant. Each night, he visited a different concubine, ensuring none felt neglected. Each time, my incense was waiting for him, its invisible spell ensuring passion but no conception. Only Catherine's chambers were spared the perfume. When the time came for him to visit her again, his desire faltered. Blood splattered across the snow. By the time the physicians arrived, it was too late. The unborn prince was gone. I arrived moments later, face pale with horror. What happened? Someone, fetch ice. Call the emperor. But the damage was done. Sima lay sobbing on the floor, wailing. She pushed me. That wretched woman pushed me. Everyone's eyes turned to Catherine. She stood frozen, her lips trembling. No, I didn't. It was an accident, I swear. But no one believed her. The courtyard filled with chaos, maids crying, guards shouting. By the time the emperor arrived, the ground was already stained red. He stared at the lifeless fetus wrapped in silk, then at Catherine, whose sleeve bore a smear of blood. His voice was deadly calm. Explain. Your Majesty, it wasn't me, she sobbed. I was trying to help her. Sima's shriek pierced the air. You liar, you killed my child. The emperor's jaw tightened. He turned to me. Empress, what do you say? I lowered my eyes, feigning sorrow. The matter must be investigated. But the Sima family deserves justice, Your Majesty. They are the Empire's founding clan. He knew I was right, but to punish Catherine would be to betray his heart. He hesitated. Confine Lady Wen to her quarters until the truth is clear. That was enough. The next day, rumors spread through the palace. Catherine had murdered the emperor's unborn heir. The Sima family erupted in fury. Their influence stretched deep into the court. Within days, petitions flooded the throne demanding punishment. Meanwhile, Wei and Yao took turns whispering venom to anyone who would listen. They say Lady Wen was once married to a prince, Yao murmured sweetly. Perhaps she simply can't bear the thought of another woman giving His Majesty a son. I said nothing, but I didn't need to. The story grew on its own. By the end of the week, Catherine's name was cursed from palace to marketplace. The emperor tried to suppress the scandal, but his efforts only fanned the fire. To quiet Sima's family, he showered them with titles and lands, and made her consort Virtue, the highest rank below Empress. No woman had ever received such honor without bearing a child. He spent half a month soothing her, barely glancing at Catherine again. But Sima could never forget the blood on the snow. Every time she saw Catherine, her hatred burned hotter, and Catherine, once untouchable, now knelt daily before the Buddha statue, praying for mercy that would never come. From the shadows of my chamber I watched them all. The emperor, trapped in his own web. Catherine, stripped of pride. Sima, drunk on revenge. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. By the time spring arrived, the palace was steeped in unease. Catherine remained under confinement, frail and silent. Sima strutted through the courtyards like a triumphant peacock, while the emperor buried himself in state affairs, avoiding everyone, including me. That was fine. The longer he hid, the easier it was to move unseen. One evening, while sorting memorials at my desk, Green Pearl brought me a sealed letter. From the outside, Your Majesty, delivered through the laundry cart. I opened it carefully, revealing my father's coded script. The investigation into the second prince's exile is reopened. Someone in the court has whispered that his confession was forced. The emperor grows restless. I suspect he's trying to erase old traces. So he was covering his tracks. Good. The more he buried the past, the deeper I could dig. That night, I dismissed my maids and sat before the mirror. Amelia's reflection stared back at me, so alike, it felt like her ghost. Sister, I whispered, I think I finally understand what you wanted me to see. The next morning, I made my move. I sent Yao Beauty to deliver fruit and silks to Sima's residence, then casually mentioned that the items had originally been meant for Lady Wen. Within an hour, Sima exploded in rage, throwing the gifts into the pond and summoning the emperor to complain. At the same time, I instructed Wei to deliver incense to the Buddha Hall, a blend known to cause vivid dreams when burned. That night, the emperor slept beside Sima again. By dawn, his attendants reported that His Majesty had awakened shouting Amelia's name. When word reached me, I smiled faintly. How tragic, I murmured. Even his dreams can't tell the living from the dead. From that day onward, he grew quieter, moodier, haunted. He began visiting Catherine's sealed quarters at night, secretly, under disguise. But I made sure someone saw him. By morning, the rumor had already reached the Empress Dowager. Chapter 3. The Empress Dowager was no fool. She had ruled through 2 emperors and survived more betrayals than I could count. When she summoned me to her palace, I knew she had heard everything. She sat beneath a painting of plum blossoms, her white hair pinned high, eyes sharp as frost. "I hear His Majesty still visits that woman," she said coldly. I lowered my head. "Your Majesty, I dare not speak of the Emperor's private matters." "You will speak," she snapped. "You are his Empress. If he is blinded by lust and pity, it is your duty to make him see clearly." Her tone softened slightly. "You remind me of your sister. She too was gentle, but she lacked your patience." I hesitated. "The Emperor grieves her still. Sometimes grief clouds reason." "Grief?" the dowager scoffed. "He dishonors her memory every time he sneaks into that woman's chambers." She turned her gaze to me. "If I were you, I would make sure the late Empress's name remains untarnished, no matter the cost." I bowed deeply. "Your Majesty's lesson is carved into my heart." When I left her palace, I already knew what I would do next. If I wanted the dowager on my side, I had to give her proof. Proof that the Emperor's secret lover had betrayed the dynasty itself. That night, I summoned Wei and Green Pearl. "Find the maid who once served in Lady Wen's former household, the one who entered the palace under a false name." 2 nights later, the maid was brought to me, trembling. "I remember you," I said kindly. "You once served Lady Wen, didn't you?" She dropped to her knees. "Your Majesty, please, don't kill me. I know nothing." "You know enough," I said quietly. "You saw her meeting the Crown Prince before my sister's death, didn't you?" Her eyes widened. That was answer enough. By dawn, she was gone, found drowned in the lotus pond. But not before leaving behind a single written confession. I sent that note directly to the Empress Dowager's desk. The next court session was explosive. Before the Emperor even entered, 2 ministers had already stepped forward, waving the anonymous confession. "Your Majesty," they cried, "it accuses Lady Wen of past adultery with the late second prince and conspiracy to harm the former crown princess. Such a woman endangers the realm's moral order." The Emperor's expression froze. He scanned the letter once, then crushed it in his hand. Lies! But the Empress Dowager's envoy stepped out from behind the curtain. "His Majesty's mother demands justice for the late Empress Amelia." The room fell silent. He could not oppose his mother without igniting suspicion. "Confine Lady Wen to the cold palace," he said finally, voice tight. Catherine was dragged out screaming, "Ethan, you promised me. You said you'd protect me." The Emperor turned away. "Take her." As her cries echoed down the corridor, I felt no triumph, only a strange calm. This was not the end. When the news spread, the ministers rejoiced. The Empress Dowager prayed before the ancestral tablets, and the Emperor did not appear for 3 days. That night, as thunder rolled above the eaves, I sat beside the young prince's cradle, watching him sleep. His small chest rose and fell steadily, his face a mirror of Amelia's. Green Pearl whispered, "Your Majesty, Lady Wen is said to have gone mad in the cold palace. They say she screams your sister's name every night." I looked down at the child and stroked his tiny hand. "Let her scream," I murmured. "Let the whole palace hear her madness. The more she screams, the more guilt the Emperor will feel. He'll never escape it." A distant rumble shook the lanterns. Outside, the rain began to fall. I lifted my gaze toward the dark horizon. "Ethan Zhao," I whispered, "this is only the beginning." The rain lasted 3 days and nights. On the 4th morning, sunlight spilled into the corridor like cold silver. Green Pearl came running, face pale. "Your Majesty, the Emperor has fallen ill." I set down the tea I was pouring. "What illness?" "The physicians say it's poisoning. They can't find the source." Poison. The same word that had once taken my sister's life. I walked calmly to the Hall of Serenity, where the Emperor lay on his bed, pale and sweating. He had not summoned me. Of course he hadn't. But the Empress must visit her husband. The chamber smelled faintly of medicine and metal. When I entered, the imperial physician quickly knelt. "Your Majesty, His Majesty's condition is unstable. Please, avoid distressing him." I nodded and approached the bed. He opened his eyes when he heard my steps. For a moment, confusion flickered, then guilt. "Claire," he whispered hoarsely. "Don't speak," I said softly. "Save your strength." He reached weakly for my hand. "You've always been kind. I was wrong about you. Don't blame me for what happened." I smiled faintly. "I could never blame you, Your Majesty." But inside, I wanted to laugh. He didn't even know what he was apologizing for. For Amelia? For Catherine? For using me as a mask for his grief? Perhaps he thought one gentle word would erase all of it. When I left his chamber, I instructed Green Pearl quietly, "Watch the physicians, find out which herbs were used." By nightfall she returned. "They used aconite, Your Majesty, the same one found in the late Empress's tonic." I froze. The same poison, the same pattern. And now, the same man was the victim. Who prepares his medicine? The same apothecary that once served the second prince's manor. Perfect. Karma, it seemed, had good memory. I turned toward the lanterns flickering against the window. "Let no one interfere," I said. "Not yet. Let him taste his own sins." That night, thunder rolled again over the palace roofs. The storm had returned, and this time it would not pass quietly. The next morning, a eunuch arrived trembling at my door. "Your Majesty, the cold palace. Lady Wen, she's gone mad." "Mad," I repeated calmly. "She claims the late Empress walks in her dreams, whispering to her. She screams every night that a woman in red stands by her bed." A woman in red. Amelia had been buried in crimson robes, the color of imperial brides. "Send word to the Emperor," I said. "He must know of this." By noon, Ethan Qiao demanded to see me. He looked haggard, his skin gray, lips cracked. "You sent that message," he said bitterly. "Why torment her? Haven't you punished her enough?" I tilted my head, expression calm. "Your Majesty, she cries your late wife's name each night. I thought you'd wish to know." His jaw tightened. "You always twist everything into virtue. And you always twist sin into love," I replied softly. He flinched. For a long time we stood in silence. Rain drummed against the eaves again, relentless as fate. Finally he spoke. "Claire, when Amelia died, you were still a child. You don't understand what happened between us." "Then enlighten me," I said. "Tell me, what was she to you?" He hesitated. "She was necessary." That word cut deeper than any blade. I smiled, slow and cold. "Then I suppose I am necessary too." When he left, I went to the cold palace myself. Catherine was huddled in a corner, hair matted, her eyes wild. When she saw me, she screamed, "She's here! She's behind you!" I turned, nothing. She shrieked again. "She says you'll burn with me. You'll all burn." I crouched beside her and whispered, "Maybe you should listen to her. Perhaps she speaks the truth." She froze, trembling. Then I leaned close enough for her to smell the faint perfume of gardenias, Amelia's scent. Her face twisted in horror. "You, what are you?" "Her sister," I said, rising, "and her retribution." When I left, her screams followed me through the rain. The Emperor's illness worsened. He began seeing visions, so said the servants. At night, he claimed he heard a woman singing in the garden, a lullaby only Amelia used to know. He ordered the guards to search the grounds, but found nothing. Sometimes he would wake screaming, calling my sister's name. I watched him unravel slowly, piece by piece. The court grew restless. The ministers whispered of omens and ghosts. Even the Empress Dowager summoned priests to cleanse the palace. During one such ritual, as monks chanted outside the Hall of Serenity, I entered quietly. He sat alone, staring at the jade cup on his table. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning. "Why not?" "Because I can't look at you anymore," he murmured. "You look too much like her. Sometimes I forget who you are." "And what do you remember then?" He turned toward me, eyes hollow. "That I killed her." The words hung in the air like smoke. At last, the truth from his own lips. "Why?" I asked softly. He closed his eyes. "Because she found out." "Found out what?" "About Catherine, about everything." He covered his face with both hands. "I thought I could silence her, just for a while. But she drank the poison before I could stop her. She said she'd rather die than bear my child. So that was the truth. Amelia hadn't been murdered. She had taken her own life. But he had driven her to it. I felt no mercy. "And yet," I said, "you used me to ease your guilt." He looked up, desperate. "Claire, I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I said evenly. "You hurt us all, and now the palace reeks of your sins." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Rest, Your Majesty. You'll need your strength for what's coming." "What's coming?" "Justice," I whispered. When I turned to leave, thunder split the sky once more, shaking the doors of the hall. And for the first time since I entered the palace, the Emperor looked truly afraid. The next morning, the sky above the palace turned a strange shade of gray. Thunderclouds loomed, heavy and swollen, but the air was too still. Something was about to break. The Emperor called for me. When I entered, he was sitting beside the open lattice window, his robes disheveled, eyes bloodshot. In front of him lay Amelia's jade pendant, The same one I'd hidden inside my sleeve years ago. He had found it. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. I didn't answer. He slammed his fist against the table. "Answer me." "It was hers," I said calmly. "I keep it as a reminder of what you took from her." "I didn't kill her," he shouted. "No," I said quietly. "You just made her wish for death." He froze. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "You think I don't regret it?" he said finally, voice breaking. "Every night I see her standing there, looking at me with those eyes. I can't sleep. I can't eat." I tilted my head. "And that's supposed to make it better?" He laughed bitterly. "You're just like her. Every word you speak cuts me open." "Good," I said. "Maybe now you know what she felt." He stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "If I die, the court will tear itself apart. The prince is still too young. The dowager will not last another year. Do you want chaos?" "I want justice," I replied. "Whatever it costs." I turned to leave. Behind me his voice trembled. "Claire, you don't understand. The poison, I can feel it again." I paused only long enough to say, "Then you finally understand her pain," and walked away. 3 days later, the emperor collapsed during court. The ministers screamed for physicians, for prayers, for the gods themselves. But I knew the truth. His end had already begun. That night, I stood in Weiyang Palace as the rain finally ceased. The air smelled clean, almost new. Green Pearl entered quietly. "Your Majesty, the emperor's condition is worsening. The dowager has ordered the preparation of the imperial will. And the prince? Safe in your care." I looked at Amelia's son, his round cheeks flushed with sleep, his tiny fingers curling into fists. The future emperor, my sister's legacy, the time had come. "Bring the ministers at dawn," I said, "and prepare the empress's seal." By morning, the golden dawn poured through the palace gates. The court assembled, uneasy and pale. The emperor had not died yet, but his reign was over. With the dowager's decree and my father's army behind me, the transition was inevitable. When I entered the Hall of Ancestors, all bowed low. I lifted my voice, not loud but clear enough to fill the marble hall. "By the Empress Dowager's will and heaven's command, the young prince shall ascend the throne. The former emperor shall retire to the Temple of Reflection to recover from illness." No one dared object. As the dowager's seal pressed into the decree, I felt the weight of the past years lift from my shoulders. Outside, the temple bells began to ring, solemn, endless, echoing across the morning sky. At dusk, I went alone to the imperial garden. The plum trees were in bloom again, the same flowers that had witnessed Amelia's wedding, her death, and my own coronation. The wind carried the faint scent of gardenias. The emperor, no, the former emperor, waited there, leaning weakly against a pillar. He looked smaller now, as if the crown had been the only thing holding him upright. "You've won," he said hoarsely. "Are you satisfied?" "This was never about winning," I replied. "Only balance." "You think you've restored balance? You've doomed the realm." "No," I said. "I've freed it from rot." He laughed bitterly, coughing until blood stained his sleeve. "You're colder than I ever was. You made me this way." We stood in silence. The wind rose, scattering petals like ash. "Claire," he said suddenly, voice softer now, almost pleading, "will you at least stay until it's over?" I looked at him. This man who had destroyed my sister, our family himself. "No," I said. "You'll face the end alone. That's justice." I turned to leave. Behind me I heard him whisper, "She's here." When I looked back, his eyes were fixed on the trees, wide, terrified. "She's smiling at me," he gasped. "Amelia, no, don't." And then the garden burst into flames. The attendants would later say lightning struck the plum trees. But I knew better. It was her. Amelia's final mercy, or her final wrath. By dawn, nothing remained but smoke and silence. The empire mourned the passing of a ruler. But I mourned something else. The last ember of love burned to ash. That night, I sat beside the new emperor's cradle. He opened his eyes, so calm, so clear. "Sleep, little one," I whispered. "The world you'll inherit is finally clean." Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, white, endless, erasing every trace of blood from the earth. Chapter 4. The first year of the new reign passed in silence. The boy emperor was bright and gentle. Amelia's eyes, my father's calm, and a trace of Ethan Zhao's arrogance. He called me mother, though everyone knew I was merely his aunt. The court obeyed me. The dowager died that spring, and my father, now Grand Chancellor, ruled the empire beside me. Outwardly, everything was perfect. But every night, when the lanterns burned low, I would hear faint footsteps behind the silk curtains, light, graceful, like someone pacing barefoot. Sometimes, I smelled gardenias again. Once, in a moment of weakness, I called softly, "Sister?" The air trembled. No answer. Perhaps ghosts don't speak to those who have become ghosts themselves. One day, my father came to see me. He had grown old, his hair silvered, his eyes sharp as ever. "Claire," he said quietly, "you've won, but you cannot stay here forever. The throne belongs to the prince. I merely guide him." "You guide everyone," he said, looking at me with weary pride. "But power is a blade, child. Hold it too long and it cuts you." I smiled faintly. "Perhaps I've already been cut," he sighed. "When Amelia was alive, you laughed often. Now I see no trace of that girl." "That girl died with her," I said. He said nothing more. Before he left, he bowed deeply, the Prime Minister kneeling to his own daughter. It was the last time I saw him alive. He passed away in autumn, his heart failing in his sleep. The Empire mourned him for 7 days. I mourned in silence. Winter came again. I walked alone through the rebuilt imperial garden. The plum trees had grown back, young and pale, their branches dusted with frost. The Emperor, my nephew, was now 7. He followed beside me, clutching my hand. "Mother, will Uncle Ethan come back someday?" he asked softly. "No," I said. "He's far away now." "But I saw him in my dream," he whispered. "He was sitting under that tree, smiling." I froze, the very spot where the fire had begun years ago. "What did he say?" "He said he's sorry, and that Aunt Amelia is no longer angry." I looked down at the child. He was smiling, innocent and content. The wind stirred the trees. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw them both, Amelia in red, Ethan beside her, hand in hand. Their faces peaceful at last. When I blinked, they were gone. Only the scent of gardenias remained, faint but warm, drifting through the cold air. Years passed. The boy grew into a wise emperor. The empire prospered. People called me the silent regent. They said my rule was gentle but unyielding, that my eyes were as calm as still water. No one remembered the blood that bought that peace. Sometimes at dusk, I would sit before the empty mirror in my chambers, the same mirror that had once reflected 2 sisters side by side. I no longer saw my face, only hers. Amelia's smile, soft, forgiving. "Sister," I whispered, "it's over." Outside, the evening bells rang. The sound rolled across the palace roofs like a distant tide, fading into twilight. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, my heart felt light, not happy, but quiet. Pure, quiet joy. The kind that comes only after every wound has scarred, every debt repaid, every soul forgiven.